Okay, so we came all the way here from Scotland, which kind of like should give you an idea of the SC in this SCONe thing already. So we're revealing the secret very, very slowly. I want to talk about something that is a little bit different today, a project that we started within this SCONe thing. There is this very intimate link between Salerno and Dundee, actually, that I wanted to reveal here as well. You can see that here in the background. Both places, Dundee and Salerno, have waves. Okay, thank you. Sorry, it only gets worse from here. Thanks. Dad jokes. Okay, so what's the SCONe? This is SCONe. SCONe is the Scottish EU Critical Oscillations Network. We started our work in 2021. Very briefly, we got some funding back then because when Brexit really hit, what the Scottish government wanted to do is to attach the researchers that worked in Scotland closer to people who work in the EU. For us, this worked really well. Actually, the idea wasn't really ours. It was Paul Sausing's idea. I think a name that rings a bell for some of you here. And in the meantime, we started out with a few labs, but in the meantime, we have grown to about 50 researchers in 15 different labs and countries, I think. And we are here at this specific conference because both organizers are also network members, and the weather at this time of year in Scotland is not as good as it is in Salerno. So 2 very good reasons to be here. If you want to know more about SCONe and what we're doing, you can look that up on this website. I'm really happy that we have a chance to have a little bit of a symposium here and kind of like close out the conference. One of the projects, so there are several projects going on in SCONe, some of them longer than they should, but that's always the case. There's one that I want to talk about today very briefly, and that is our effect size project. And we've had this idea at some point to do some research together and quickly realized it's going to be possible within the network itself. We will have to go to the literature and see what we can extract from there. And we had this idea that when you look at the, even if you think back at the conference, typically what we do is we look at our data, we find an effect, and then we think, okay, so there's a link between those 2 things. That's great, let's move on, let's do something else. But what we're really interested in, and at the end of the day, should be the strength of the relationships between things, right? So that's what we started out with. And then as sort of like a follow-on point, what effect sizes can we actually expect? So if we do cognitive neuroscience research, what are the things that we can reasonably see in our data? Maybe that even goes back to the times of, maybe you remember the voodoo correlations that some people pointed out in data a while ago. And went on thinking about what can we actually look at, what's the big effect that we can sort of like salvage, that we can start out with and look at, and we ended up looking into alpha lateralization. You might think that is a relatively boring effect. I think that's the point of this particular analysis, because we wanted to have something that is non-controversial. When we decided on that, there was also some drive to look into alpha phase effects, but in 2022 we sort of like finished up this big special issue in the European Journal of Neuroscience. That one of the conclusions of this special issue basically was that it's a bit controversial, which means that we would be looking into a literature where there's likely a publication bias and file draw effects. We didn't think we have that, at least to that extent, with alpha lateralization, which is an effect I think that everyone can agree on. I think you all know that. It's basically just an effect of either attending to the left or to the right visual field, and then in EEG, you will see this very characteristic pattern of alpha power lateralizing according to where you attend to. I should also mention those 2 people here are absolutely instrumental and invaluable members of the team of getting this SCONe effect size project on the road since the beginning. And one of the things that we also looked at is sort of like a more methodological point. What is the quality of statistics that we can expect when we start looking at papers? How much time? Okay, it's fine. Very good. Okay, so I just want to give you a very, very brief overview of what we've done so far. we started out with a very principled approach to literature research and found with our search terms, which we took way too long to finalize, we found 4,500 papers published from 2000 to 2023. And then we had to cook that down, obviously, to an amount of papers that we can reasonably look into. So in the first step, what you do in these meta-analysis is abstract screening. I should mention at this point, none of us had ever done this before. So there's lots of new stuff going on in this community as well. Luckily for us, we came across this tool here, AS Review, which is kind of like an AI-based or AI-assisted system of allowing us not to have to look into 4,500 papers, but ultimately we looked at 400 of those. And then there's sort of like a ranking going on with a certain cutoff where you can say, okay, so this amount of this amount of papers we will actually have to have a look at. Okay, and in our case, this amounted to 316 papers that made it into the next stage, the full text screening stage, for which we used a different tool that is called Covidence. I don't know, has anyone here in this room used Covidence? Does that ring a bell? Okay, so, okay. So what we did in the end was that 10 people went through the full texts, and to this day, we haven't really arrived at the final number, but it's going to be very close to that one. So a little bit more than half of the papers make it through the actual full text screening stage, which means that they fulfill all the criteria that we have set for papers that we want to exclude to this point. And then the next stage, so there's always another stage in this project, we will have to go to these papers and extract data according to a survey form that we have developed that doesn't only extract statistical data from those papers, but also lots of other things that we were interested in and that we kept coming up with, where at some point we just had to say we have to stop with our criteria and just get on with it. And the idea for our analysis is, and this is where this data extraction comes in, the survey form, that not only do we get the effect sizes, but we get an idea of which things might actually modulate these effect sizes. So an easy thing that you can extract from each paper is age, obviously, but you also have experimental modifications like the task type or how far the stimuli are in the eccentricity, which modality they are presented in, that might have an influence at the final effect sizes. So hopefully we end up with something like a map that you can explore a little bit and then see where there's research that still needs to be done, where do we know a lot about alpha lateralization, and what does it tell us about, the relationship between brain and behavior. I would like to present you some results, or would have liked to present you some results. I don't have any just yet. I can only tell you that it is a lot of work, which is a result in itself. Luckily, this is like a meme that somebody posted the other day on Blue Sky that I was just able to throw in. This is exactly how we feel, although we've probably also looked like this before we started the meta-analysis, but that's just a personal opinion. So what I was surprised to learn was that we needed to have lots of discussions about how do we actually define alpha lateralization, because it's not just one thing. What are our exclusion criteria and what do we extract in our survey form? That took a lot of work. I think we needed to settle on that for roughly a year and lots of meetings. And then when we look at the papers, it is unfortunately, and maybe this is already a message for everyone in this room, including myself, it is seldomly straightforward to extract exactly the information that we need, including the statistical information, but also methodological information about the experiment. So not sure what we will give as recommendations at the end of this project, but I'm sure we can do better and maybe standardize a few things to make these efforts a little bit easier in the future. To end on a positive note, we're getting there though. So maybe at the same time next year, there's going to be something substantial. And of course, a very positive note is that this is an incredible team effort. These are all the people who are somehow engaged in this project and who have worked as screeners, extractors, and analysts. Huge thank you to them, and also thanks for listening, and maybe one of you has an idea of how we could apply something like that to a brain-body situation, or is already working on something like that. So please come talk to me if you're interested. And again, thanks for listening.